everybody. Welcome back to Shannon's Lumber Industry Update. This is episode 82, and I'm going back down this urban lumber rabbit hole. I hope I'm not beating a dead horse here, and certainly, guys, let me know if I talked about this too much, but I do really feel that this is the future of the lumber industry, and this week, I'm going even further upstream. We're going to start warping young minds at the university level, and I've got two guys who started up a sawmill as part of the University of Virginia, UVA in Charlottesville, and they are essentially sawing logs taken down on that campus and repurposing them for the university's use. This is particularly interesting, and I hope you enjoy it. Guys, I've got a treat this week. I recently discovered, I don't know what we would call this, an effort, a cooperative effort, a work study turned company called UVA Sawmilling. And essentially it is a couple of guys with a sawmill taking down some trees on the University of Virginia property and repurposing them. So this week I have Tim and Andrew from UVA Sawmilling down in Charlottesville, Virginia, joining me to talk about this idea of, we're back on this kind of urban forestry chain, although Charlottesville, I'm not sure we call that urban. It's urban-ish for mountainous Virginia. Guys, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much for having us on. This is a real treat. Really neat to be able to talk with you and share a little bit about what we're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Sure. Great to be here. Very excited to share our story.
That's great. Well, Andrew, you had reached out to me on Instagram, and I immediately kind of dove into your own Instagram profile and looked up your website, and it kind of immediately resonated with me because this is something that I think a lot of other people can take a look at, and a lot of other people should emulate, and probably may already out there. So before I leave the listeners in suspense, can either of you, because you're both co-founders of this entity, kind of explain what UVA Sawmilling is.
Sure. Like you said, UVA Sawmilling is really about making use of these trees that would otherwise be turned into, wood chips, taken away to other arborists' yards to eventually hit the dump, or be taken to other sawmills. And instead, we're keeping that lumber here on grounds, either, as dimensional lumber or as live edge slabs. So it's really about just keeping it here, making it available to students, faculty, staff, and, fairly recently, we're actually able to go ahead and start to sell some of that material to the general public.
Oh, that's very cool. Very nice. So, little fun side fact. I've actually been in Charlottesville quite a bit. My sister-in-law was actually on faculty there. She taught physics for 4 years, I want to say. She ended up doing her PhD work at UVA and then ended up going on faculty in really, really far-flung chaos theory, like Sheldon Cooper kind of type stuff. She is now in upstate New York, doing a whole other thing in the private sector. But absolutely beautiful part of Virginia. Spent a lot of time down there, fly fishing, mountain biking, just doing the furniture geek thing at Monticello. So UVA, Charlottesville, Virginia, it's right there on the edge of the mountains. In a lot of ways, it reminded me of my alma mater town in Boulder, Colorado, very small mountainous college town. And so to kind of put things in perspective, Andrew, when you talk about keeping the trees here, first of all, we're talking about Charlottesville, but more specifically, we're talking about the UVA campus, correct?
Right.
This is not like with the city of Charlottesville. This is with the university.
Yeah, we don't take any trees that aren't from grounds, right? We have enough stuff that comes down regularly to give us more logs than we kind of know what to deal with. We don't actually see every single tree, at kind of our site, right? Some of that is still leaving grounds and whatnot, but we do our best, with what we have. And occasionally we can kind of make a phone call and say, hey, we noticed this giant tree just disappeared. Where did that go? So,
yeah, interesting. So, are you officially part of the university, or are you an independent entity?
That's a good question. And Tim, feel free to chime in here. We have been working since 2020 to find, our best spot at UVA.
Okay.
We're definitely not our own company. We're not our own, LLC by any means. But we're playing this interesting game between departments to try and find a home. Mostly because we're cross-departmental. We're interdisciplinary. We need help from a lot of different folks here at UVA to kind of make things happen. So
it's interesting. Yeah, I could see where that would. One wonders if, like, rolling you into like a non-department, like academic department,
right.
and rolling you into like maintenance, almost.
Well, yeah. I mean,
it's interesting.
That's. Excuse me. That's kind of where we sit right now, right? We operate on the, facilities management's landscaping yard, right? That's where all the logs already go. We're not having them carted somewhere else. So there's a lot of work being done on the landscaping side to help organize the logs, to bring logs there, to start to communicate to us, what's going on, or us communicating with them about milling. Right, but a lot of our demand is from the architecture school. Tim and I both, went to school in the School of Architecture here at UVA. This is where we met and worked together on this project. And so we find a lot of our users are here in the wood shop here. So, it's kind of an in between. We've recently gotten a thumbs up to become a more formal student group through UVA Sustainability, which is really awesome. That's going to allow us to kind of better perpetuate student involvement, student volunteering in a more cohesive way. And that's going to get somebody working with UVA Sustainability specifically as a paid position to, really be managing this part-time from the student side. So we're really excited about how that will turn out this fall. I mean,
that's particularly interesting because that could be kind of a watershed. Where I'm going with a lot of this is, as being officially affiliated with the university, maybe some of those logs that slip through your fingers might not happen anymore. Just through lack of knowledge, there are other. I mean, it's a big campus, certainly, and as you say, there's a lot of trees, more logs than you know what to do with. And just because in the past, we've always had that, when the tree comes down, we call on a tree company, they remove it, and they don't really know any better. But as an official, department or whatever you want to call it, however the university wants to label it, it seems like you might have a better chance of capturing, if not 100%, certainly have some guidance on what happens to the percentage that doesn't come into your log yard, which would be, I think the message there to the university, and this goes back to previous conversations I've had on this show about the resource that they're currently, for lack of a better term, squandering. Missing opportunities, not only just, you guys have a YouTube video on your website that has a couple of beautiful tables at the School of Architecture. There's a fantastic place to get furnishings, feature walls, just cool stuff around the academic buildings. But more importantly, now you're selling it. And, there could be revenue now, albeit quite small, but just there's so many advantages to the university to better manage their existing inventory. Yeah. Which then brings me to the next point. You've got students involved now. It's not just about dealing with the trees that come down, but what about the trees that replace those trees that come down? Now, some of them may not be replaced because, buildings expanding or whatever, but what about the actual silvicultural management of the land that UVA owns? Have you guys worked on that side of things, or still early days, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really exciting about having now a student group that starts to build is we sort of have a mini army that can attack all these ideas. And
nice. cheap labor too.
Yeah, and it's and it's great to
They're actually paying the university to do this work. That's a good deal.
For
exactly.
better or worse.
I need some of those. I need some of those at my yard. That would be great. Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it allows us to pull from a lot of different interests just from students alone. But yeah, I mean, right now we've obviously been working with what comes down, but I think future conversations should really be framed around, all right, you put up this new building, or we've understood that we've had to clear this area for a number of different reasons. How can we start to replant or think about how we replenish this material in this space in Charlottesville? And like I said, now that we have, or Andrew had mentioned, we have this sustainability group that's going to start to arise. So hopefully we'll be kind of having a voice in those conversations as we start to talk about, all right, we've taken all these trees and we've milled them into material, but now how do we kind of bring back into this cycle more growth, so it doesn't just end
Right.
at our milling or the chipping of anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And one wonders, is it possible to diversify that ecosystem? You know, when you see, you know, certainly from what I've seen, you guys have got some oaks and some maples, very typical for that particular region of Virginia. But one wonders what else could thrive there, or what else could have an opportunity that maybe isn't in the natural forest because it's being choked out by, frankly, quite dominant maples and red oaks and things. What are some of the other more, quote, ornamental species or less shade tolerant or less competitive type species that could possibly foster in like an arboretum type environment that is, you know, a closed, not closed system, but you kind of know what I mean by a campus, a controlled system like a campus. That could be particularly fascinating and could be an opportunity to foster a new renaissance of the American chestnut or something like that. It could be really
the new birthplace of the American chestnut.
There you go, right?
Yeah.
Right? I think Jefferson would be into that.
Absolutely.
So, you know,
No, it's
but I'm thinking, because you're an academic institution, you know, you're not kind of subject to some of the competition that is in the private sector. You have that institutional background that this could be, for lack of a better term, a safe space to experiment with some of this stuff. Could be really cool. Maybe gross oversimplification. Everybody who's had to publish in the academic environment is like, what are you talking about? Non-competitive. Shut up. You don't know what you're talking about.
What do I do every day? Yeah.
Right.
No,
So,
I think that's a really interesting point. I mean, there is, right, UVA has a big foot in Blandy Arboretum, which is the state arboretum. I believe it's about 2 hours north of here. And, you know, we've made a little bit of contact with them, but I think, you know, they're interested in maybe a longer term solution than what we initially proposed. And as we continue to fortify, you know, and become something with maybe a little bit more oomph, at least from their perspective, then, you know, we could start to really chase that down up at Blandy. But yeah, also certainly here. I mean, it's interesting, right? We have a bunch of other sort of interesting species that hit our log yard, right? We have Zelkova, mulberry, redbud, you know, sycamore, you know, still nothing really crazy for this area, but certainly stuff that's not commercially you know, available or of interest, right? We just had some workbenches built for a class completely out of mulberry, and then with a catalpa shelf, right? So stuff that everybody around here was like, what are you doing with that wood? Like, we don't make things out of that, you know? So yeah, it was kind
I
of
always love expressions like that.
yeah.
That's akin to that. That's trash wood. Yeah.
No,
I think it's funny you say nothing unusual and you throw Zelkova just out there casually. You know, it's an invasive species from southeastern Asia, but yeah, nothing unusual.
No.
I immediately picked up because Zelkova is fantastic to work with. It's got a ancient history in Japan, used for tansu construction along with Polina or kiri for millennia. And Zelkova has well, you're both architecture graduates. I have been approached just in the last month by multiple architects in like huge firms, like New York City, building, architecture for lifestyles of the rich and famous, looking for Zelkova.
Wow.
Really interesting. I don't know what happened at some conference somewhere. Maybe, AAI brought something up and said, here's a species you should play with. But for some reason, Zelkova has become very, very popular very recently. It's kind of interesting. So I guess it's good that it's a somewhat invasive species because we can actually start to get it locally now.
Yeah.
Really cool. Anyway, tangent, forgive me.
You're fine.
So let's talk about you've said a couple times, we've got more logs than we know to deal with. There's plenty of, for lack of a better term, inventory. Right now, why are these trees coming down? What's happening to create turnover, I guess, in the forest there on campus?
Sure. So a lot of what we're dealing with, actually, most of the trees we're dealing with come down just from new construction on grounds. So, of course, there's 10-year plans and additions to classrooms and student centers and everything along those lines. And a lot of what we're getting is strictly just from clearing for construction. But of course, down here, we're also dealing with emerald ash borer, which is taking down a ton of ash, or at least we're working with some faculty and other groups around Charlottesville that are actively working to figure out what is the best plan to deal with the infestation that could completely kind of like wipe out these trees. So we're working with some faculty on understanding what the kind of flow of material can be, and can we tag these ash trees prior to them becoming too far gone from the ash borer, and then start to collect that and use that so it doesn't become waste or a hazard, depending on where they are. So I think we're dealing with kind of all the same or similar felling issues that are happening all over. Construction, age, and kind of any pests that might be kind of destroying them from the core, and making sure that nothing destroys anything on grounds.
Sure. It's interesting. A little bit of Googling. University of Virginia currently has 2,000 acres on their campus. That's a sizable plot of land. Yeah. And you look at aerial photos. It's funny because I made the comparison to Boulder. The big difference being Boulder doesn't have the trees. I mean, we have some trees in Boulder, but very, very different trees. Not quite the hardwood forest that you see in Virginia. The ash borer in particular is kind of interesting. And here again, you're right there with departments of life sciences and biology departments, and lots of botanists and things that maybe can start to get to the bottom of some of this. In my experience, ash borer, I mean the bug itself, certainly it's going after the sapwood. That's what most bugs go after because that's where the food is, that's where the sugar is, and things like that. It's not that they won't go after the heartwood, but if there's something else tastier, they'll kind of leave the heartwood alone. And I think one of the biggest mismanagements that we're seeing from the ash borer blight is, that ash tree has, it's infected, take it down, mulch it, burn it, whatever, get rid of it. And there's nothing wrong with the heartwood in many instances. There's examples where that tree could be sawn, and then you've got to saw off the sapwood and destroy the sapwood, mulch the sapwood, kill the bugs, and the heartwood can very easily be salvaged. In some instances, depending upon the amount of infestation, the entire thing, heartwood and sapwood, can be salvaged, just like you would, any of the oaks with powder post beetles. They're in there. That's what kiln drying is for. That's what heat treatment is for. There's kind of this, and rightfully so, right? I mean, the ash borer is terrifying. I mean, it's similar to the chestnut blight is what we're looking at. It's on that level of magnitude. So there are people who are rightfully like, get rid of it, burn it, quarantine it. Yeah. Don't even look at it. It's funny we talk about this now in our COVID world. Maybe we can relate a little bit more to the American chestnut, to the white ash tree.
Oh man.
So there's mismanagement in many instances, kind of knee-jerk reaction to just destroy the ash trees, cut them down, mulch them. They've got to be, I'm sorry, but they've got to be cut down. Once they're infected, we do have to take them down to try to, eliminate the spread. But it can be turned into lumber. In fact, it probably all should be turned into lumber. You guys have a kiln, do you not? A solar kiln?
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Have you been able to put any ash into it? Have you been able to do any heat treatment with it?
Yeah, we've definitely put some ash through it. And like you said, I think it's interesting how you kind of harped on this mismanagement point, because it's definitely right. It's like, oh, it's ash, it got the beetle, okay, we can't use the tree. No. The heartwood most of the time is, it's usually great. It's still wonderful. So, back to the kiln. I mean, we've had success there, because it is a solar kiln, and as you kind of talked with others in earlier episodes, right, about solar kilns, getting it up to that really nice high sterilization temperature can definitely be an issue sometimes, especially not in the summer months. But most of the time, we've been able to kind of get away with what we've got anyway, right? We're still getting it decently dry. We haven't had any bug issues here at the school. And, for thicker material or material that does need to be dried quicker, we do have one of our sawyers who's quite local, just on the east side of town. He actually has a vacuum kiln as well. So, we can kind of work with him, work with, the quote unquote client to kind of get that stuff dried and quickly and well. And then we know 100%, that's just, no risk of bugs or anything there. So that's kind of the thing we do to make ourselves feel good if necessary. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that. It's a little bit more than just feeling good. I mean, as a micro sawmill, you have that higher level of quality control. So, and here again, mismanagement certainly of just mulching up these ash logs, but then there's also this idea that, well, if we're not going to mulch it, then we're just going to nuke it. We're going to throw it in a kiln and crank it up, and really make sure those bugs are dead. And I see this with a lot of large commercial kilns where, they're cramming 20,000, 30,000 board feet in there with the idea of just completely eradicating any possibility of life inside that kiln. And I'm somewhat sympathetic. We actually had a yard, kind of an ancillary yard up in Connecticut for a while. We've since sold the property, but we actually had a powder post infestation on one corner of the yard from some reclaimed timbers. We had bought a barn essentially, and we're dismantling the barn for the reclaimed material, and it was scary because we had 3 or 4 million board feet of material on that yard that could have possibly been infected. So, we very quickly grabbed that reclaimed stuff and we stuck it in a kiln and went through the fastest possible heat treatment we could do to get rid of it. And, now it was already very, very old timber, and, drying that is a totally different ballgame. But still, you wonder, could we have been smarter about that? And I know many, many commercial kilns that have done the same thing. You get back to this expression of kind of the knee jerk, oh my God, we got to kill it. And as a smaller mill, working with, a single solar kiln, you've got the capacity to, raise the temperature slowly, but then also paying attention to what's going on and looking for the telltale sawdust piles. And, that actually could be a very, very good thing, actually a good way to kind of manage it. It's certainly not knee jerk in that respect. So that's very cool. So I'm just trying to think of ways you guys can go to the university and get more funding.
Thank you. Yeah.
You say it's difficult because you're cross-disciplinary, but I say embrace it. I mean, there is so much opportunity as a living classroom here for students of all different degrees to benefit from this. This is kind of exciting. I really think And I wonder how many other universities have looked into this. There must be guys
There
like
are.
you in architecture departments and other places. Because there are a lot of universities like UVA with this type of acreage, and a lot of just beautiful trees, and we don't think about, they gotta get cut down from time to time. Certainly, universities expand. One of the things I always find interesting is universities expand. Certainly, buildings get bigger, but then you also just have a tree was planted next to that building, and that building's been there for 100 years. I was at William and Mary recently when I went down to Williamsburg,
Oh, wow.
and the what is it, the architect, Christopher Wren, the Wren Library
Yes.
down there.
The Rendell.
That's been there since what Jefferson attended.
And then some, yeah.
It's been there a while, in other
Yeah.
words. And there are trees like right up against the library. And you're thinking, what were they thinking? And you're like, they weren't. Like, they were saplings when they planted them there. Or when the building was built, they cleared a bunch of land, and maybe they had no idea what it was going to look like 200 years from now. And now there are grounds crews like pruning the branches so that they don't like
Good.
break the
Yeah.
windows and things like that, because the tree is right up against the building. And you look at that and you go, that tree's going to have to go. Like, give it a couple of years, and somebody's, roots are going to cause problems with plumbing or something like that. That tree's got to go. And it's kind of heartbreaking because that tree has been there, shaded Thomas Jefferson, for God's sake.
Right.
So those types of things, we don't really think about it. I recently went back to Colorado Springs to visit my mom, and it's actually the first time that I've been to her house in like 20 some years. This is the house that I lived in, when I went to high school out there. Been out to see her multiple times. Usually it's been in Denver at my brother's place, but it's been a very, very long time since I'd actually been down to her house in Colorado Springs. And, again, I went to high school down there. Like, I know my way around like the back of my hand, but I got lost because the trees had grown so much in 20 years.
Wow.
I didn't recognize streets. I'm on a street and I'm like, no, this can't be Broadmoor Valley Road. There's too much shade here. Because in 20 years, go figure, trees get bigger. And now we're seeing the same thing where you've got these homes that have trees like 6 inches from the side of the house, 1 foot from the side of the house, because so much growth has happened over time. And all those trees are going to come down probably inside a year, because frankly, they're just dangerous that close to it. So this is happening in universities everywhere, buildings that have been around for decades and decades and centuries. This is very cool stuff. I'm excited to see this, and maybe more of this can happen. So let's talk brass tacks. Let's get the tools out of the way here. What's your setup like? You've got a solar kiln. We established that. What type of sawmill are you working with?
So we do not actually have our own sawmill. We contract in, for a variety of reasons, we contract in local sawyers, right? Kind of as you could probably gather, having visited here, with the way this place is wooded, there are 10, 15 people, in a 30-mile radius of here with an LT40. So, it's not hard to bring in somebody with a wood miser. They come up, they do the sawing, and then they head out. For our bigger stuff, we have 2 different sawyers that we can kind of call on, who will bring in their Lucas mill. And that's a dedicated slabbing mill, right? That'll cut up to about 6 feet wide. Right. And so that's really nice too, because that breaks down, that's portable, so they can bring it up, set it up around our large log, and they usually bring a piece of equipment as well, so we can kind of manipulate things on milling day. So, mostly we've got the kiln, we bring in the sawyers, they come out, they do their thing, and then as a group, we're, stacking, stickering, covering that wood to air dry before it's going into the kiln. And then, all the processing of that lumber is happening here at the A school. or more recently, facilities management, the cabinet shop, or some other groups have started to reach out and said, hey, we hear you guys have some lumber. That sounds pretty interesting. We think it could go somewhere. So, they've started to work some of it as well. Yeah.
That's interesting. And for the listeners, the LT40 is about a 36-inch capacity from a log perspective.
It'll
the Wood-Mizer LT40. Mm-hmm. It's kind of the flagship, of the home sawmill or whatever. That's really, I'm actually really kind of glad to hear this, because this is one of the things that people immediately think, well, I got to get a sawmill. Well, do you? Mm-hmm. Do you really? The explosion of companies like Wood-Mizer and kind of the democratization of sawmilling is such that if you've got logs, you probably can find someone to do this. And I wonder, maybe eventual growth, if you get to the point where you're capturing 100% of the logs coming out of UVA, and you get enough student involvement, you might be able to get some funding to get your own sawmill. But I don't know. A lot of times, I say the same thing about woodworking. I'm constantly talking to my own students about, don't go out and buy 7 hand planes right now. You might hate this in a year. Go buy a hand plane, build a couple of things, and you'll see what you need from there. So for other people maybe looking to emulate what you guys are doing, pick one. Syracuse University. Ooh, some good white oak up there. Syracuse people, if you're listening, pay attention. You may not need to go get a sawmill. Because I erroneously was thinking, okay, if I'm going to do this, step 1, go get a sawmill. Step 2, question mark. Step 3, profit.
Yes, exactly.
Sorry, South Park reference. I gotta call out to my former dorm mates, the creators of South Park. I should have stayed in touch with those guys. That would have been a smart move. They were up on the 3rd floor, I think. I was down in the basement. They didn't pay attention.
Oh, man.
Anyway,
come on.
Going off the rails again. This is kind of cool. So,
I think
that's actually a really great way to get started.
Yeah, I think it just really lowers, right? It lowers the barrier to entry, right? To create the material. Also, these sawyers, some of them have only been doing it a few years, but some of the sawyers we bring in, right? They've been sawing their whole lives, or 30 years, and they're gonna say, okay, you're getting these rando logs, they're not straight, they're not 12 feet long, they've got some knots, here's how we could, make the best use of that material. And, that really came into play, I think, more in the beginning, right? When we really didn't know much about sawing lumber and our log pile was smaller. As it's gotten bigger, we can kind of pick some better stuff to start with. And we started to understand a little bit of how, how to saw these logs. But yeah, I would absolutely say, if you're not super sawmill savvy already, call up your local Wood-Mizer dealer, and they can tell you, who they've sold a sawmill to that might be close to you. And one of
they have an online directory even. On the Wood-Mizer site.
Oh, okay, yeah. And one of our kind of main cheerleaders down here, Mr. Joe Lanin, he's over at the Virginia Department of Forestry, which happens to just be across the street from the site. He's worked to create a business directory for folks here in Virginia. So, you can just look it up. And it's really easy to find somebody with a sawmill once you know kind of where to look. You could find that, so yeah, some of our precedent research had us looking up at Michigan State. They do have their own mill. Penn State's Elm Project. Down in North Carolina, we found some folks that are doing this sort of thing, but they brought in a sawyer. So I think it's kind of a case by case basis so far from what we've heard. But yeah, I think it's a great way to just get some wood, show that there's demand, show that it can be done, and then as you build up, go for it.
Yeah, there's almost a proof of concept that you want to make sure you get down before, like you said, you kind of go full in and buy the 10 hand planers. You want to make sure that you start to set up the school as well to be able to take this on. to be completely honest, not many students and few faculty know kind of the processing of milling. And one of the biggest things that we've learned from that was, as we have the sawyers up here, it becomes almost a classroom for students who come and volunteer. They get the chance to sit and talk with these sawyers as they're actively making decisions, turning the log on the mill and making sure, okay, I'm cutting it this way up to make sure I get rid of this part or fix that. And as we've talked with students, that seems to be one of the most valuable things to really start to glean from these milling events that we have. Because if we want this to continue, and if Andrew and I, kind of head this for a while and then go off somewhere, we want to make sure that there's people who understand kind of what needs to happen, what's going on at Milling Days, and kind of keep that legacy going. Because otherwise, no one knows how to do it. No one knows how to field those questions or even know how to set things up. So it's been really exciting. And that's why it's great that we're part of a university and we have a chance to kind of get students who are at a higher level of just interest and want to learn these things. And now, like I said, we have this army of people who really want to go out and start working with the material or finding new ways of processing it, or new tools to use to process maybe kind of wonky logs or logs that don't fit on the sawmill easily. And that's what's really exciting about what we're working with now.
Yeah. Now, who is handling the actual felling? Is that whatever construction company or an independent contractor has been called in by the university, I guess?
Yeah, we have arborists here on grounds that'll deal with some things, but it's kind of it's above our pay grade who exactly does what and why. But we have some arborists here that definitely do some tree care, and then we have 3 or 4 companies that have a contract with the university, to bring stuff down, especially really big stuff. There's some folks that come in to do that. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
So have you been able to interact with any of them to kind of get a feel for, like, what would they normally be doing with that log, and how do they feel about you taking it?
Yeah. So let's, I think kind of the best example is probably the one that involved the tables you mentioned, right? The tables we have in our outdoor classroom. That is a tulip poplar tree that was about 125 years old and came down outside Alderman Library when the library expansion began. And this was about 2 years ago. So we had just started, and I just thought it was amazing. We had some of the early project advisors and mentors there, and at the kind of construction consultation meeting, and I got invited, and I was like, holy cow, I'm in way over my head. And we walked in there, and we just kind of politely said, hey, would you be willing to bring this tree down, in kind of as big a log as you can? And the discussion is, okay, that's going to require a crane because this is a 52-inch DBH tulip poplar. And it's tall. So, they relayed to us, if you hadn't asked for logs, we would be chunking out this poplar stem in 1 foot long sections, right? Basically giant cookies, because those are going to be 1,000 pounds each sopping wet. And that's what our, little mini skid that loads our truck or chipper or whatever is going to be able to handle. But they brought them down at 13 and a half feet long each. We got 4 of those logs.
It's a big trunk. And
it was literally earth shaking when they dropped those out of their truck. But yeah, sometimes some of those sort of things, can happen. We have one other example where a tree some students were installing, this was kind of crazy. They were installing a cool, pavilion as part of a biomaterials building exhibition made out of, trees that we had milled up there for it. They were installing it, and across grounds in front of the chemical engineering building, this other large tree was being taken down. And, someone sent Tim and I a video, and we're like, hey, what's the story on this? So, we kind of followed up. And because the truck was in the shot, we were able to call them and say, hey, where did this tree go? It's not up on our site. And they were really nice, and we were able to work with them. They brought the whole tree back. And this is this big Siberian elm. It's been outside the chemical engineering building for forever, like you said. It was a big one. We got a bunch of slabs out of that. We got some really neat cookies out of it. Really weird shape and interesting looking wood, right? And so that was another cool moment. But I think in general, and I know I've kind of gone on here, but in general, I think now that folks know, especially the arborists here on grounds that kind of coordinate what's happening, as everybody's kind of learned that that's happening, and we're milling material, we've found a lot more of the logs that are coming up to the site are longer, and therefore kind of more worth the milling. And that's been really great.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of read my mind there, and I'm really glad you went down that road, because that was kind of my thought is, without your involvement at the felling stage, you're going to end up with, a bucked log in 1 foot increments, because suckers are heavy. I don't want to move that around, and cranes are difficult. They tear up the grass. They're very expensive, all that stuff. So there's also issues of, especially in older properties, with infrastructure underground. You say it shook the earth when they dropped them in your log. Imagine when the tree fell.
Right.
It will tear up pipes and shatter fiber and all kinds of stuff. Well, maybe not fiber. I don't know. I don't know enough about fiber optics. That's people are going to write in. I'm still getting emails because I said that Vermont produced more maple syrup than Canada.
Oh, goodness.
So,
I remember when you said that.
Well, it's more than any other state. They produce more than any other state. It was a very ethnocentric statement.
Yeah.
But anyway, I've had instances like in my own neighborhood where some of the plumbing, the wastewater, is old enough that it's there are still clay pipes. You drop a tree on that, and those clay pipes are gone. They're dust. So there's all kinds of issues that rise when it comes to actually felling the tree, and usually the path of least resistance is take it down in little pieces.
Right.
Less impact on the ground around it, less danger to the guys cutting it down. Sometimes it's an entirely different company, because one company just may not have the skills, may not have the tools to fell, to do the old, timber, and the whole thing comes down. That very rarely happens anymore. So I guess the next point, which you nicely illustrated for me, is if this is something that somewhere we're looking to do, you can't just expect, if you say, hey, if you have wood, be careful what you ask for, because you might get a whole bunch of little bucked circles, little 1 foot sections. It's actually very rare that they're going to bring down a whole log. But you guys have started to kind of re-educate, as you just neatly closed that point there by saying now you're actually starting to get people are recognizing that there is another life for this downstream. Yep. That's very cool.
Yeah, it's funny. You don't recognize how many trees are coming down until you start to get into this, and you walk down the street and you're like, oh, that tree's coming down. We have to talk to someone about that. Or and you start to make people.
Yeah, you just wake up in the morning listening for chainsaws.
Yeah, exactly.
What was that? Was that a chainsaw? Quick!
It's so funny, Tim.
To the sawmobile.
You should tell your
jump in.
You should tell your snippet, Tim, about
it's really funny. A lot of so I'm currently lecturing here at the architecture school at UVA, and a lot of the professors kid around, and whenever there's a large or heavy storm here in Charlottesville, they ask me if my ears perk up, and I just get excited as I look out the window, waiting for trees to fall, so that we can go grab them and mill them up. Which I find really funny, because after these storms, you drive around and you see some trees fell, and and you think, oh, is that through UVA's property? Can we get that? Are we getting that? And it's become really funny to just become hyper aware of that. And yeah, I mean, the tree Andrew was talking about, the elm was found by a student, someone who had talked to us about sawmilling and was like, oh, this would be an incredible piece. Why are like they're gonna chip it up otherwise? And now we kind of have those people on the lookout to make sure that this material isn't going to waste, that it's not getting chipped up, and that it can get this second life. So that's really been great, starting to set up this kind of like initiative now on grounds where everyone's aware of what's going on around them, and how we can save that material and use it.
That's outstanding.
And to backpedal just a smidgen, I think part of the point that you were making, right, about the felling of the trees, and kind of be careful what you ask for, otherwise you might get a bunch of little stubbies. I think that becomes an interesting challenge, but also a very worthwhile discussion to happen in more urban environments, right? I think it's more often, right, like a lot of the YouTube, kind of felling and chunking out that I watch, it's because it's right next to someone's house. Those same kind of things are applicable when it's right next to a building. So it's, in some instances, right, it's like that extra mile that you have to ask, to say, hey, could you bring that down in 8 or 10 foot lengths instead of just, 3 or 4 feet? But most of the time, I mean, the arborists here at UVA that we've worked with have been super excited, not just supportive, but excited, right, to see that something is happening. And I think that that's kind of played to our advantage and the program's, advantage and success. So that's been great.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it's mostly just about informing. It's not about, you don't have to sell anybody. Everybody's on board.
Right.
Whether you're talking about, carbon footprint, or you're just talking about, the legacy of that tree. You can be a tree hugger, or you can be a complete scientist. You're all on board. So we're uniting. We're across both sides of the aisle to get political here. But I think another point that we might look at, and maybe this is an opportunity for you guys to mature this program even a little bit more, and maybe it's time to get a chainsaw. But those 3 and 4 foot links, they're not useless. I think in terms of my own shop and the furniture I make, the average part in a piece of furniture is usually under 3 feet long. So there is life for those things. I mean, sometimes you're right. There is no safe way to fell this tree. I mean, yes, you could bring in a big crane. It just may not be economically feasible, or you can't get the crane in there because it's right, it's between 2 houses, or it's in, a backyard, and there's no place to actually bring the crane, the rubber tire crane around. And sometimes just it's not a possibility. You can't get an 8-foot bowl or a 10, 12, 11 foot, trunk there. So they do have to bucket. Does that mean, automatically it should be mulched? Absolutely not. And if you guys end up in the possession of 3 and 4 or 5 foot long sections, there's a whole other opportunity. Try your hand at an Alaskan mill. And there's a whole other class right there. But then, which leads me to my next point, the wood that you are milling. Up until very, very recently, where you've started to sell, I think it was on auction sites is what I was looking at. This is going back into the university community. So who's using it, and what are they using it for?
Yeah, so a lot of the material, like Andrew had mentioned, of course, both of us are alumni of the architecture school here. So we're kind of giving a lot of the material back to those students. And some of the larger slabs that we're selling are open to the public. So if you're looking to buy a slab for a table, of course, you can go to the website and start to get some material from us. But yeah, primarily our kind of group that we're providing material for has been students and faculty and research. So there have been a number of courses here that we've worked directly with in order to provide material to study different tectonic ideas, or how wood is working through different ways of cutting and kind of operating on it. There's other courses that are exploring kind of material culture and tradition and technique here at the school, which is one class that we're working with currently this fall semester, providing them a lot of material, different types of species and everything, for them to explore and understand kind of traditional woodworking techniques and kind of the culture around woodworking techniques and felling, and just essentially learning about the process that we're doing, but in a traditional sense. And then there's other projects.
Sign me up. I want to take that.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's made through the architectural history program here, working with an architectural historian and preservator here on grounds. So you're really getting, I mean, that's one of the beauties of UVA's campus is it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. There's a lot of preservation that has to happen both in and around the buildings. So it's important to learn those styles and those techniques so you can really understand the culture of the campus. But yeah, I mean, it can range from everything from we had students asking us for material to carve spoons for an art class, all the way to kind of taking custom cut lumber to build pavilions out on like the grounds of the architecture school. And everyone uses it for a number of different reasons, which is also great for us because it allows us to mill for a purpose with this material, as opposed to just milling and kind of just having it sit there. We're custom making a lot of our material for the students here and faculty, and we're taking tables and making tables for faculty offices and staff offices here, and of course really trying to get it back into the buildings that might be taking the trees down. We want to set up that pathway so that we don't start to lose these trees anywhere as construction kind of continues.
That's where it gets really cool.
Yeah.
When you actually start to see interiors of the building furnished or provided by the trees that grew and shaded the building. Those are the stories that, admissions departments love that type of stuff.
Exactly.
PR people love that stuff.
That was,
the person giving the campus tour, this table we're sitting at was built by this tree that stood on the grounds for 100 years. That stuff is amazing. And from an architecture perspective, that is so incredibly popular right now. To tell a different story and to relate this structure, this building, this room to a history like that. I mean, from a commercial perspective, you can't put a price on it. Right. Believe me, there's a lot of people out there capitalizing on that right now. Yep. It's not priced by the board foot anymore. It's priced by how much you got. But yeah, this is kind of exciting. I think my wife was a graduate at St. Mary's College down in Southern Maryland, and there St. Mary's City was the oldest city outside of, I think, Jamestown. I can't remember. I think it was one of those things where like St. Mary's City and Jamestown like battled one another for a while. Like, no, we're the oldest. You're the oldest. I don't know, but they're all very, very old, like 1600s. And that school, St. Mary's, has a very strong anthropology and sociology department because they've got this incredible resource right there. So many of the classes are actually out in the original structures from the 1600s, and they're doing work study and field study and things right in there. And they also have a strong historic preservation carpentry program for the same reasons you're talking about. If they're doing restoration work, they're emulating the exact techniques. So yeah, I don't know what kind of wood shop they have at St. Mary's, but there's another opportunity right there. Because again, the building, of course, was made with the trees that grew in the area because there were no trucks to cart the logs, from one side of the state or nation to the other. The possibilities just kind of keep going on and on and on. It's really very exciting to see.
Yeah. And I'm glad you bring up other universities, because that's kind of one of our big future goals, is to not just have this be a single entity that UVA can have only. We want it to create a network of of schools and research universities and just colleges all over the country that can start to implement this. You know, we talked about Penn State and Michigan, and we would love to create this larger network that allows for us to all piggyback off of different ideas or create larger funds to focus on larger scale projects. I mean, we have highly specialized faculty and really interested students who want to continue and work on this stuff. So why not create a large coalition of universities to focus on that?
Right. Yeah. That's really, really cool. You guys, well, you've listened to the show, so you probably heard the episode with Cambium Carbon. You might want to reach out to them. Because I know one of the things that they just, they were on Capitol Hill, and there was a recent bill passed that's putting a lot of money into urban forestry. I think 150 million or something like that.
Yeah. Just saw
And
that.
I believe they're funneling some grants. So there could be some potential funding for you guys there. But your idea of talking about creating a coalition of universities, that could play very well into like the software that they create, because that's really what they're doing is creative cooperative inventory amongst micro sawmills. And local sourcing is only as good as knowing that it's there, you know. So there's an opportunity there. Heck, again, in the university environment, there's probably somebody in the computer science department who could build it for you, and link together, you know, Spartans and Cavaliers. Cavaliers? Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, you keep saying Michigan, and I know it's not Michigan State, but Marquette University, up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, they have their basketball arena. It's a dome, is built entirely out of wood.
Wow.
And it is one of the coolest things that it should be. Like, if there's such a thing as architectural wonders of the world, maybe there are, it ought to be in that list. Because imagine, like, you know, the Astrodome, not quite that large, but it's a you know, Marquette University. I'm not a huge basketball fan, but they tend to show up in people's brackets in March Madness like all the time. They obviously have a respectable basketball program up there, so they have an entire dome built out of timber, and it's not plywood. I mean, it's some of it's laminated timber now, but it's a timber frame structure, and all of that came from local material. I mean, the Upper Peninsula is filled with all kinds of amazing trees. There was an example, because I want to say it's been there quite some time, but because the UP is not exactly around the corner, it is remote. There's a great bumper sticker up in the Upper Peninsula that says, "End of the Earth 6 miles, Upper Peninsula 7 miles." It's very, very, very apt. But they sourced all that locally as well, and I wonder how much the university had to play into that. I mean, certainly they were the customer, they were the person buying it. But yeah, that type of thing could fund future construction, you know, not just expansion, but there's always like a new building going up, new construction going up. When I recently visited my alma mater, I didn't even recognize it. And they've got an earth science building that's going up that's supposed to be state of the art. And, you know, there's such an opportunity there for the university to pull on its local resources, while at the same time educating students. Yeah, it's really exciting. Of course, I'm one of those like nerds that if I were independently wealthy, I would go back to school. I wouldn't get a degree. There'd be no pressure of like, you know, I have to take this class and this class, you know. In other words, I could skip the calculus class that I hated and take the earth science classes that I loved, you know. You just continue to take classes. That this type of curriculum, I'd be all over that. To jump on top of that type of stuff. That's very, very cool. So, if somebody out there is listening, there's a grad student or an undergrad student or some guy that lives near a university who's just wondering, hey, this is cool. Would you have any advice for someone, like if they wanted to try to start this at their university or small liberal arts college? What would you say to them?
Go for it.
Yeah.
No, really, I think that's the first thing I would say. I mean, it's, you know, we didn't do the you know, super, you know, delicate walkthrough of our whole origin story, but really this all started here because of a wood identification lecture I went to. I was a TA in the wood shop, the woodshop manager said, "Hey, I'm having this talk for the TAs. I've got pizza." I went there, and the gentleman who gave the talk, right? He was an architectural conservator here, and became kind of a mentor for the program, and it all spiraled out because we both watched Matt Cremona build his bandsaw mill, and we were like, "No way, let's keep talking about this." And he already knew a little bit, right? Having been here for a while, he knew a little bit about the logs, and kind of where they were kept, and the fact that nothing was done with them.
Right.
So yeah, I would say go for it. Go find those people who are in charge of the logs. Talk to them about what it costs them currently to handle that as a waste product, right? Like right now, it's kind of up in the air between the tub grinder and the milling, like which is more economical for the university. And so we're kind of playing off of that in terms of continuing to fund the milling. And then I think the other part, and Tim talked a lot about this, right? The student interest and the demand. I think without the demand, we would be a little bit more hard pressed to have come as far as we have. But the fact of the matter is they're students, and, sometimes they're kind of like termites, and they just go through wood like crazy, so having that demand gives us a lot more room to say, yeah, we need to do this.
So you're saying it's getting mulched anyway, just in a different way.
Yeah.
One botched mortise and tenon after another. It's still getting mulched. It's just mulched in the form of little tenon cheeks in the trash can.
Oh man,
I get it.
There are some larger projects between it and being mulched, but it goes
Right.
somewhere. But yeah, no,
Cool.
and
So who do you think those? You said, talk to the people who have the logs. Who are those people? I mean, obviously, you can only really speak for your situation, but I imagine there's some similarities from one institution to another. Is that like facilities management? I mean, who would you even look up in a directory?
Yeah, so here that's definitely the case, right? The landscaping department's under facilities management, but I've had the opportunity to talk to. I believe it was the head landscape architect at Vanderbilt. He was here at UVA for something, and our kind of name got passed off to him because he had some interest in doing this sort of thing, right? So it seems like at Vanderbilt, at least, and my apologies, Vanderbilt, if I understand incorrectly, but right, he had. He had kind of some control or some input there. That's not someone that we've worked with here at UVA to do this. And then, I think at Michigan State, I think they've got a whole thing all built up around their program, and it doesn't sound like they have to go to anybody. It sounds like, it's just kind of part of their program. They're, directing where the logs go and all of that. So, I don't know. It might take some digging. I've called William and Mary. That was actually where I went to undergrad, right? And I called around and tried to figure out who might be interested in talking about this. And I got redirected to their arborist a bunch of times. So I think that might require some digging, but I'd say it's worth it, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, William and Mary might be a bit of a unique situation, too, with the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation right there.
Right.
Because I know, the carpentry shop and the guys at the Anthony Hay shop, they have a lot of their own lumber sawn locally, coming from the local area, and there's such a close ties between the city of Williamsburg, the University of William and Mary, and the Williamsburg Foundation.
Yes.
That there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people you could probably talk to there.
Yeah, I mean, I think at most universities, you would hope that there's some sustainability efforts happening. And I think that would be kind of the easiest way in, is just chatting with those people in charge of those sustainability efforts. One of our first conversations we had was with UVA's sustainability. And they started to point us in the direction of this person and that person. And then you start to just create a kind of group of people to reach out to when you have questions. I think that's the most exciting and important thing about it. I mean, the university is full of interested people in their disciplines, and they want to talk about these things and share it with more people. So I think that you have environmental sciences faculty, kind of anyone to reach out to, which should start you off in any direction, which is better than just standing still. So kind of just reach out to whoever you think might be leading these initiatives.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think you're right. It's never going to be one person. You know, you're going to end up building a network, and even now, as you guys say, you've got your network of students who are like, hey, did you guys see this tree's going down? Yeah, that's very key. And eventually, in maybe the not too distant future, there will be a time when it's just understood. You know, if a tree is being felled on the university property, it goes here. Because it is university property. I mean, that tree belongs to the university. So therefore it should go to the quote UVA log yard, which just could be you guys. So I guess that being said, where do you guys want to take this? Like, let's talk a little bit about hopes and dreams on this. We've hit on some of it, but formally, where do you see this whole program going?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like we mentioned, we talked about this network between universities. That's a kind of a larger scale. I think on a kind of smaller university scale, one thing we're really interested in is creating a curriculum around this and finding a way to create, be it a course or a lecture or something, or a series of lectures or workshops, but just a way to start to educate students, faculty, and staff, and anyone who's interested in this workflow in this lumber industry. At least in architecture school, we learn a lot about other materials, concrete, glass, steel. And I think it's starting to come about a little bit more, but the lumber industry isn't really focused on or talked about that much. And with a lot of these sustainability efforts that firms are looking at and people are looking at, I think it's really important to start to really have this conversation of understanding where the wood that you build with comes from. It's not just taken off the shelf from Home Depot or Lowe's or anything like that. There's a whole process that had to go through in order to get that material there. So we would love to take to teach a course or have a course taught where we're a part of it in order to kind of talk about everything we've just talked with you about. Identifying trees that might have pests in them and might be infested, and then talk about trees and how to remove them safely and how to buck them for something that's useful, and how do you know what's useful and what's not, and just kind of navigate all of what we've been navigating for the last 2.5 years, because there are a lot of interested students and a lot of interested faculty in this, and and that's on kind of the strict like lecture style stuff, but again, bring it into the fabrication techniques and traditional woodworking and getting that into it. At the architecture school, we have a fantastic wood shop here and a number of different makers grounds or maker spaces around grounds here. And I mean, I think that's something else that we start to lose as everything becomes so much more digital, kind of that hand touch on everything. So we would love this to be part of the curriculum here at UVA. And work towards setting that up in order to teach everyone about this, because it's exciting and has a lot of great benefits when more people know about it than few.
Agreed. And it's a grassroots effort at this point. I think it's interesting you say that, the lumber industry doesn't get talked about in a lot of those spaces. I completely agree. And I blame the lumber industry, honestly. It's an industry that has remained stuck in its ways for centuries. And in many instances, and especially I think at the university level where you've got young idealistic kids who want to change the world, the lumber industry is vilified. And when you talk sustainability, lumber is like, it's the last thing you talk about, but it's the most renewable resource we have. And that message doesn't really make it out. And again, I blame the lumber industry a lot. The term lumber baron came about very honestly. There was a lot of raping and pillaging going on, but the fact of the matter is that was centuries ago. And the lumber industry as it exists now, certainly there's always bad seeds, but everyone that I know they all love wood,
Yeah.
and they're very concerned about sustainability and proper harvesting and being able to keep a consistent flow of lumber and healthy forests. Most woodworkers I know love trees
Yes.
and love to walk amongst the trees just as much as they love to work the tree in their shop. This is one of those things that I think we need to instill at that level, instill into the minds of these young idealistic kids and let them know that wood is not evil. Wood is not anti-environmental. It's just the opposite. Because you know what sequesters carbon fast? A growing tree, as compared to that 60, 70, 80-year-old tree that's barely sequestering any carbon at all.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think
Take that tree down for many reasons, safety reasons, all kinds of reasons. Plant another tree that's going to suck up carbon way faster than that old tree. And rather than mulching it and burning it, which guess what? It releases the carbon. Let's turn it into something, and that carbon remains sequestered, for forever and ever and ever. So all those fun buzzwords are there, and I think we could really change some minds, starting at that level.
I mean, I think
So I'm on board.
Yeah, I think this plays in well to. I think it was the episode with Cambium Carbon, right, where you talked with them about the instance where they had such and such species, probably walnut, specced out by the customer, and Baltimore Lumber brought them in and was like, hey, what about this? Right, this is local. Yeah. This is something. I can, get you a bunch of, it's beautiful and, it's just purely aesthetics. Right. And so honestly, I mean, educating a whole cohort of architects, year after year about this sort of pipeline of material and the advantages of it is going to play right into the continued growth of, thinking about local wood, instead of having to always reach for that exotic or always reach for, the walnut or something else. Not that those are inherently.
It's that lack of diversity in species that causes problems in sustainability. And it's one of those things that has people really, really freaked about the emerald ash borer because ash is used everywhere. Right. And if ash is gone, it's like, well, what's the alternative? Well, oak. Well, powder post is causing real problems with oak. It's like, oh, crap. What do we do now? There's a lot more species out there. Right. And again, I blame the lumber industry. Hundreds and hundreds of years. This is the tree that's going to create the clearest board. It's all about grade and getting NHLA is the grading scale there is in the 50s. It's still used because there isn't another alternative, but most local mills, they kind of have their own grading because NHLA grades don't get you there. The market is demanding clearer and clearer and clearer stuff. So to do that, it's become cherry, maple, ironically walnut, because walnut is not a clear tree, but just because it's the color that makes walnut popular. And it's like those species domestically over and over and over and over again. And we're seeing the same thing exotic-wise. It's the same couple of species. Mahogany was this way for years and years and years. And CITES regulation finally kind of has started to right that ship a little from where it was sinking before. But we look at it with decking now. Ipe has become the species. And guess what the CITES convention is looking to possibly vote on in the next couple of months. So what happens, if that goes? I think that could go one way or another because there's still a lot of Ipe out there, but still, it's just that species. So what about black locust? What about new technologies like modified woods that are taking species like ash, and since you got to heat treat it to get rid of the bugs, well, let's heat treat it. Let's torrefy that stuff and turn it into thermally modified ash, which now can take the place of Ipe as a decking material. There's all kinds of options that the commercial lumber industry is not really presenting to the architect. And then the architects kind of get stuck in their ways, and it's like, well, I want to do something fancy, so now I'm going to use teak. Okay, have you seen what's happening in Myanmar lately? Maybe let's go another direction. What about Iroko? What about cypress? Totally different species, but we're talking color palette wise, there could be an option there. And if you're in Louisiana somewhere, there happens to be a cypress tree growing around the corner.
Yes.
So Tulane University, that's the only university I can think of. Sorry, LSU, there's another one down there. If they need to do something on their campus, they could be using, bald cypress from down the street or whatever. That completely changes the game. When we start to source locally, it's mind-blowing how things change. Diversity opens in the species that you're looking for. Costs certainly change dramatically because your supply chain is like one link. It's rather than 1,000 links. And there's just so much feel good in the whole thing as well. But silviculturally speaking, you've got better control over the forests that way. It's just, yeah. Like I said, you don't have to sell this to anybody. You just have to bring it up because mostly it's unknown. More than people just don't know that this is a thing. So, yeah. That's great. Well, when you guys get your class going, I'm going to sign up.
Definitely.
I'm going to audit
Yes. We look forward to that.
Amen to
come in
that.
and audit it and ask difficult questions from the back of the room.
Oh, great.
My professors hated me. I was that kid. I admit it. I remember I got in trouble because, this was high school. But I asked a pre-calc teacher why do I care about I? Like, I is equal to the square root of negative 1. Like, why do imaginary numbers? It's like, well, I wasn't trying to be like a jerk, although I was probably coming off that way because I was a snot-nosed punk. But, it was like, how am I going to use this? And the professor got really upset because he couldn't give me an answer. He's like, well, if you were theorizing about something, I was like, so I'm never going to use this, in other words. So yeah, you'd be talking about sawing logs and things, and I'll be the guy raising my hand saying, how am I going to use this? That's be the question. Although that does bring up another point that I wanted to say earlier. You guys had said that now you're more purposely sawing. There is another massive transformation with this locally sourced idea is when you're sourcing from far away, and the lumber industry as it stands now, we're sawing into standard dimensional boards. And that's well and good because that then allows you to do kind of anything with it, But when you are involved, when the sawmill is involved with the architect or the construction company, and exactly, or the students, and what they're trying to build, and back to the original point about 3-foot lumber is not useless. Maybe that student says, well, I'm building a bench. Well, then let's not saw up this log. Let's use up some of the little guys that we already have. Or they say, I need this type of grain. The architect is saying, aesthetically, I want this type of grain. Well, you saw that board differently. It's maybe not a through sawn. Maybe it's more of a quartered look. Or maybe you're going for a different section of the log to saw that. And it ends up better using that material. And frankly, you're going to get a better product because you know what it's bound for. You can quality control all the way up the supply chain, literally back to the stump, and say, okay, this is ultimately the end product we're going for, so this is going to be the best way to do this. And every single time I've seen that happen in my other job, it's been a success because there is no relying upon a standardized grade. There's no relying upon standardized dimensions and hoping that will work. It's here's what we need, so let's go ahead and saw it. And more importantly, it opens opportunities where, well, I'll go exotic here, but I had a customer that was looking for wide plank teak flooring. I said, okay, what do you mean by wide plank? Well, 22 inches wide. Sorry. Can't happen. It's not that teak doesn't grow that big. It's just you're going to get like 1 out of every 50 logs is going to net that. And the square footage they needed was 12,000 square foot. Like, no, sorry. That's just, we could do it, but it's going to take us 3 years to develop.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, what do we do? I said, well, why is this important? Like, why teak? Well, I don't know. Let's go. And there was several conversations back and forth. And eventually they got to the person who said, it's the color. We want that kind of honey brown color. It's like, is that it? It's like, it wasn't that they wanted teak. They wanted the color. Okay, well, we could add the color, or we can go by it naturally. Are you aware of a species called Iroko? It happens to also be kind of honey colored and brown. And oh, by the way, the tree is enormous. It is huge. Like, if you want 40-inch wide planks, I can do that for you. So we changed the conversation. Actually ended up saving a lot of money because Iroko is substantially cheaper than teak. It's also not in a war-torn region of the world right now. Well, Iroko comes from a lot of places, and Africa is not exactly friendly in all places. But we were able to supply this to a customer, and it didn't take 3 years to develop, and you would never know. Like, because what was important was the color palette and kind of a look and feel they want. Of course, it also had to be vertical grain as well. You can't have 22-inch flats on. It's got to be 22-inch quarters, of course. So, all of that, because we knew where it was going, because we knew what was important, we were able to flip the script and change the conversation entirely to an entirely different species from an entirely different continent, to really get a better product in the long run. This is the same thing that, just a heck of a lot closer to home. You're not crossing oceans at this point. You can now say, look, these are the logs we have. What do you want to build? This, understanding of wood science can say, well, maybe this, softwood over here may not be the best choice for that, but this oak may be really good for you. And yeah, that's really exciting. I keep saying that, but I'm excited.
No, it's definitely some of the most satisfying and fulfilling milling we do, right? When people come with the request, it hits our spreadsheet, we look at it, we double check with them, and then we go for it, and it's just awesome. They roll up, or we're bringing the lumber to them, and it's just a great feeling to say, hey, here's exactly what you asked for. It's great. Right. Everybody's thrilled about it. And the Sawyers are great.
Group hug. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Fantastic. No, it's just such a warm, fuzzy feeling. Yeah. We're all going to gather around the log and sing Kumbaya.
Yeah, that's what's next.
Yeah. Now I'm really tapping into my Boulder, Colorado roots.
Yeah.
People's Republic of Boulder up there. So, well, then I guess let's wrap this up and say, where do people find you? If they're interested in learning more about your program, maybe they're on the university and go, I didn't know you guys were here. Or if they're interested in maybe getting some lumber for you, how do we find UVA Sawmilling?
Yeah, so luckily we have a website just called UVASawmilling.com, which is a great way to see what we're up to. On there we have a number of different things that we're trying to also add to consistently. But we have kind of our mission, our team, student work, faculty work that we want to start adding. And then, of course, what we're going to start implementing soon is the selling of these slabs, which, of course, all of the proceeds from that would go straight back into the program to allow for us to kind of operate on our own sustainable way, self-sustaining way. And so we have our website. You can follow us on Instagram as well. We're working on really having this presence as much as we can, not only to the university, but to anyone else who's interested. And yeah, I mean, we have a contact us form there, so people can reach out to ask questions, if there's other universities or interested parties around Virginia or anywhere else. We're more than interested in hearing from them and trying to get kind of a larger network, of course. I mean, that's kind of the whole thing. Let's create this major tree network. So yeah, you can check us out on UVASawmilling.com to learn a lot more.
And I'll add, that's the same handle for your Instagram as well, UVA Sawmilling.
Yep.
I actually was watching a video you guys just put up recently. You were inlaying something into the end of a board. What was that for?
Yeah, so those are some large workbenches that are going to go over to a new fabrication space the architecture school is outfitting. And so instead of, going to buy some random workbenches from who knows where, we just are using some slabs that we have up on the site. So that is my attempt at a decent inlay to fix that crack, but we'll see how it works out.
Nice. Very cool. All right. Well, I think that will do it, guys. This is it's the same story that I've had on a couple episodes, but with a different bent to it. really getting grassroots here, and let's warp some young minds at the university level and get them into this idea. That's what college is, right?
Right.
Warping minds,
Absolutely.
get more of this idea that, you know, trees don't necessarily, or lumber doesn't necessarily have to come off the shelf at the Home
Right.
Depot.
Mm-mm.
God, it really shouldn't come off that
No,
shelf anyway.
just don't
but
go there.
yeah, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk to me. And
Thank you.
I'm absolutely going to look you guys up because I get down that way a fair bit. And I'm going to come visit the log
Yeah,
yard.
definitely.
Wonderful.
We look forward
Be
to it.
awesome. Great. Well, that'll do it. Thanks for coming on the show, and I appreciate you listening as well. Keep listening.
Oh, we will.